So welcome everyone to our talk on DevOps, a catalyst for enterprise agility. My name is Esteban Garcia. I'm a DevOps consultant with Nebbia technology, and I'm all about automation.
My name's Heidi Araya. I am all about people and happy teams.
Today, we're going to talk to you about a company named Unicorn Co. Unicorn Co. is a fictitious company, but it's made up of real stories that both Heidi and I have seen and have worked with in our Agile consulting and DevOps consulting. Unicorn Co. is a company that has had quite a few challenges, and today we're going to talk to you about how we helped them go from that company to a company that's now thriving and delivering value to the customer.
So why do we need this conversation? Well, Unicorn Co. hired me as an Agile coach because they said we have multiple teams working and we're doing our sprints and we're delivering story points, but we still have no visibility into progress and our code is still filled with defects. And when it comes time to deploy, the teams say that's not their job to do that. That is the ops team's job.
And the VP of engineering at Unicorn Co. called me one day and said, hey, Esteban, we're having problems delivering code, delivering value to our customers fast enough. And I know that if you bring in your automation and your tools, we're going to solve all the problems. So I came in, and then we started working through some of the items. And then pretty quickly, we realized that without being able to get into the backlog, without being able to make our automation prioritized with the teams, we were never going to be able to make this happen.
Oh, wait, but I have access to the backlog. Maybe we could work together.
Yeah, I think so, because even though some people might sometimes say that DevOps and Agile are not compatible, at the core of both of them, we are trying to get people to collaborate together, help companies and teams deliver value to their customers.
Yeah, you're right. So I've heard Agilists say collaboration will take care of all your tools and automation problems. And I hear DevOps people say tools and automation will take care of all of your collaboration and communication problems. But the reality is we need to work together to deliver value to the business.
So Heidi, what are we going to be learning today?
So today we're going to talk about typical challenges that we have experienced implementing Agile and DevOps in enterprise settings and some ideas for overcoming those challenges. Some key drivers that we've seen for a successful transformation to Agile and DevOps environment. And at the end, we really want you to go away with concrete tips on how you can get started in your own organizations. So let's talk about what is enterprise Agile, right? Because at Unicorn Co., for example, it grew from just a couple of teams to over 40 teams. So when we talk about enterprise Agile, we don't mean just one or two teams working together on very small projects. We mean multiple teams working in conjunction on the same product, project, or initiative where they have interdependent code, knowledge, and structures. And in enterprise Agile environment, teams should be owning design to deploy, but they really, in our experience, don't have this.
And DevOps, whenever we talk about DevOps, it's not just about the tools. It's not just about the process. It's not just about automation. DevOps starts with the people. It starts with figuring out who are the people that are trying to collaborate, put together the process that are going to allow those people to collaborate together to deliver value to the customer faster. And then we inject tools to enable those processes and those people. So DevOps, it is all about collaboration.
Right, so I'm pretty excited to do this talk because some of the keynote speakers mentioned this idea about tools and technology and people all together. So why does an Agile organization need to consider DevOps? And as a DevOps person, why do we care about Agile? So these are the things that we are going to talk about today, but really Agile is about delivering value to customer and getting that feedback. And in order to do that in an enterprise environment, we need some DevOps practices and ideas like continuous integration and deployment and all those other things that come together so that we can do that delivery to value to customers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am all about people. So when I'm working with a tools consultant, I'm concerned because I think, well, in Agile we care about collaboration. So how does that work in DevOps?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, DevOps is not just about the tools. It's not just about automating everything. Let's think about why are we automating? What are we trying to do? At the end of the day, we're trying to get people to collaborate. Multiple people across an organization work together much more closely to be able to deliver value to the organization. So DevOps enables that collaboration.
Okay. Well, in Agile, we care about delivering value. So how does that work in DevOps?
Well, think about whenever you're building something, you want to be able to deliver that value to the customer. How do you measure that value? The best way to measure value to a customer is to give them working software, deliver working software to production. So through DevOps, we're able to deliver value faster.
Okay, I hear you. All right, but in Agile, we like retrospectives and inspecting and adapting. So how do you do that in DevOps?
Well, many ways. So through DevOps, we're able to enable these feedback loops. So at the highest level, by getting something out to production and getting feedback from the customer sooner, we're able to inspect and adapt on whether we're delivering the right things. And then looking at the way people work, if we're able to automate the ability to build software, the ability to test software, we're able to provide those feedback loops and get people to inspect and adapt faster.
Okay, I got it. One more thing, though.
All right.
Simplify. I'm sure I got you on this one. Simplify.
Oh, that's a tough one, but I think I can get you here. So through the use of collaboration and tools, we're able to simplify some processes that in some cases we've made really, really complicated. Think about Unicorn Co., a company that grew so fast and had all these manual processes across the entire organization. We're now able to take all those processes and implement some automation to be able to make it just a lot simpler to be able to deliver that value.
All right, we might be able to work together.
All right, we're getting closer, right?
We'll see.
Okay.
All right. So who here has heard of the Scrum Guide or read the Scrum Guide? Anyone heard of it? Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So if you have read it, it talks about potentially shippable product and potentially releasable functionality. And what we've seen in enterprise environments is that people take this and the teams are just kind of sprinting along and they're delivering their story points to an environment, but it isn't even similar to production. And so actually at Unicorn Co., what happened was a team had delivered something that they'd been working on for a few months and they put it in a production environment and it didn't even work. So we had to actually pull it back and say, we're not ready. We have to keep working on this. So we failed in our mission to deliver value to customers at that point. So what I have seen, the mistake I've seen teams make is they pay attention to the potentially part and they leave off the part that it should actually be an environment that's similar to production. Even if you select not to deliver it to customers at that time, make it an environment that is actually able to release to production if you wanted it to. So Agile is a mindset of delivering value to customers in order to get that feedback so we make better decisions about what we're going to be working on in the future.
Yeah, and then by implementing DevOps in our organization, by living what DevOps is all about, that's what helps us be releasable all the time.
Yeah, so not like this guy in the cloud.
Yeah.
So what have I seen in Agile environments? So from an Agile perspective, Unicorn Co. grew from a small company. They had cross-functional teams. Everybody was doing everything. But as they grew, we added on more developers, and now we needed development managers, and we had directors and VPs, and we had to hire QA managers and director of QA. And now we had an ops team, and we pulled them out because it was taking people so long to do this stuff that in a small team, it didn't really take up a lot of process. But now you're like, John is spending much more time on these manual processes. Let's take him out of the team, and let's make an ops team. What does that lead to? That leads to different goals. That leads to people thinking about metrics in a different way. So I had the VP of engineering reach out to me and say, how do I measure the QA people? And the development manager reached out to me and said, I'm trying to measure my developers, but what kind of metrics do I have to measure my developers? In Agile, we're talking about it takes a village to deliver something of value. So let's not measure people separately. So use metrics that make sense for your organization. Get everyone on the same page around the vision and mission of the organization, and then create metrics that make sense for your organization. And so at Unicorn Co., one of the first metrics that we established was one on pair testing. We wanted to have each story pair tested. So that was one of the metrics that brought people together instead of dividing them despite our hierarchical structure. So there are still things that you can do to bring people together.
Yeah, and then once you start measuring the things that are going to be important to your organization, now you're delivering value. Now you're measuring how much your deliveries are impacting the organization rather than just measuring an individual's contribution.
Absolutely. So what happens then? As you have manual deployment processes and you keep adding on more teams, that becomes a heavier and heavier process. So at Unicorn Co., we had teams spend time building things, and the deployments became so challenging that we pushed out, well, let's not release every 2 weeks. Well, let's release every month, and then that became 6 weeks. And then, the code had a ton of technical debt on it. So what did the product owner do? the product owner began to stuff more and more features in because he realized that this was the only chance he had to get something to the customer, so he would try to stuff in more features. But this is the mindset that we need to shift back from. Again, don't ask how much you can stuff into a release, but ask how little of a feature can be delivered before you can push it to production and get that valuable feedback from customers, because that's what it's really about.
Yeah, one of the teams that we were helping with, they had not released a piece of code in over 15 months. And the reason for that is that they got to the point that their system got so big and they had no automation. They had no way to release. And once the releases got longer and longer, ops pushed back on those releases. So now, just like Heidi said, the product owner is saying, well, if it's going to take me 6 months or a year until I get my next release, here's more features. Keep shoving them in, because otherwise I might never see them. So that talks to this point.
Yeah. Okay, so at Unicorn Co, we had no idea what customers were doing with the product once we pushed it out there. So we had these huge releases and we would push it out there, and we had no idea what they were doing with it. So the idea is, when possible, measure your customer usage patterns and errors in the way they're using the application, because you'll find they're probably using it in ways that you didn't anticipate. And even if you have to start small, at Unicorn Co, I had a team that said, from now on, we're not going to release anything to production without the ability to measure it in some way. And so just little steps that you can take to improve things along the way.
Yeah, we had this big feature which got released, and once we got to production, we just didn't know if people were even using it, or we didn't know if people were even, once they used it, we didn't know if they're clicking the button the way that people, they were getting to the button the way that we thought they were going to get to it or not. So it's really, really important to now be able to release or measure what you release.
The 3D horn designer didn't take off in the way that we thought.
Didn't take off, yeah, not at all.
So across the company in Unicorn Co, of course, you're adding on teams, and the teams still have this manual process, but nobody is realizing what a drain that is on the system that you have. And so people hear here and there, hey, it's taken a long time to deploy this, or I'm spending a lot of time doing this, and they hear it from teams individually, but nobody puts this information together. So try to work together with operations to create an automated process wherever possible. And if you're getting a little pushback, then measure the impact of not having the automation, and measure the time it takes you to do deployments manually, for example. And this might change the conversation around what it might take to get to an automated process.
Yeah, in some cases, we're just so used to doing things the way we've always done it, right? Unicorn Co has been around for, many years and has grown, so obviously we're successful at what we're doing. But we just do some things manually because that's just the way we've always done it. So in some cases, we found some very significant improvements in our ability to deliver products or deliver value to the customer much faster. But we started by being able to measure that and making it very visible as to what the impact was. Mm-hmm. And as we started implementing this automation or these DevOps practices, there's some things that we also wanted to that we wanted to solve. So one of them was that we realized that throughout time, as teams grew, they didn't spend enough time focusing on those agile software development practices. Those practices allow teams to go faster, continuous integration, test during the development, or just having the ability to deliver. So what we did is we started shifting the way people thought about new projects or new features. And we said, well, maybe before you start writing that first line of code, let's make sure that you have a way to automate. Let's make sure you have a way to do a build. So we started by just creating a CI build. Most of you probably have a system that does continuous integration or does automated builds. So we implemented that, and we implemented a way to get that code into an environment. And that allowed teams to start thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had teams that were in such a hurry to get started coding because we definitely want that next feature out there. We're spinning up new teams that they never gave a thought ahead of time about which environment is it going to go to and how are we going to deliver this to production. So create that build as early as possible and start with that in mind. Not building code, but have somewhere you're going to put it and have it be scalable at the same time.
And part of that was also measuring the right things, like Heidi said earlier. Before we were measuring how many features did we deliver this sprint, how many story points, and that was the only thing that we cared about. Now we slow down so we can deliver more in the future, more value. Other issues that we found was that operations and DevOps, we had created these silos, right? So we had spent so much time getting development and QA to work together, and that part, okay, we're doing that, but we're still thought about Dev and Ops. We have DevOps, but Dev is over there and Ops is over there. So we started thinking about how do we get them together? How do we get them to collaborate much closer together? So we first started by creating a single backlog for everyone to collaborate. And then we're also able to start thinking, well, one of the issues that we had was that even though some of the delivery teams had started creating some automation, the operations team was saying, yeah, but I don't trust that automation because once we're going to push to production, we're going to run our scripts, not your scripts. So we had these nicely automated processes to get to the lower environments, but then they were being recreated once we went to production. So to solve that, we started getting operations people to work together with the delivery teams, with the development teams, to create those automations. So now by the time we're ready to go to production, we've practiced the exact same process across the lower environments, and now we're running the same process in production. And then that also helped developers and testers work a lot closer together, because now QA no longer had the, well, now I cannot test this until the end of the sprint. I don't have an environment, since developers and operations were working very closely together. Now they were able to get those environments.
Yeah, so we've unwittingly recreated some of the problems when we took the operations part out of the Scrum teams and had them throw it over the fence again to operations. So the idea is, wherever possible, pull those operations people inside your team or have them dedicated to the Scrum teams to helping them, so they are not a bottleneck to get things done. Right,
yeah, so we moved away from having that DevOps team, but rather having a DevOps mentality across all the teams. So at Unicorn Co., this company grew very, very fast. Just a couple of years ago, there were 5 people trying to build the next, being able to sell a lot of fairy dust around the world. Now we've grown to 40 teams of 8, 9 people. We have 500,000 customers out there all buying our products. Who knew that fairy dust was so popular, right? But the problem is that we didn't scale the way that we built software. The teams were still operating as if they were that small five-person company. Whenever we had a new feature, there was no place where we could test that feature. So now teams were stepping on each other as they released. They were releasing to the same dev environment, to the same test environment. So we made sure that we created a way to have the infrastructure to support all those teams. We went back and looked at our branching strategy. We went back and took a look at our integration strategy. How do we get that code from that feature branch that's way out there into to our main line so we can release to production? And how do we integrate and make sure that we are not losing code, we're not reintroducing bugs into the system?
Yeah, so absolutely. So one of the challenges that you might encounter is a little pushback around taking time to think about the strategy, and because it might mean the teams are slowing down for a little bit, pushing things to production still in that old way. But the motto is slow down to get faster, because once you automate and you have that multi-team strategy, you're going to be much, much faster in the end.
Right. And as we started evangelizing these ideas and talking to the team about the different teams about what we wanted to do, we did get some pushback or some just questions. That sounds like a lot of work. Wow, okay, one of the managers said, that sounds great. We're going to create a project plan that's going to start 6 months from now, and in 2 years, we're going to be a DevOps organization.
That doesn't sound very agile.
It is not at all. So Heidi and I went back to him and said, we pushed back and said, no, how about we start now? How about we start adding value or improving the processes today, looking at the right tools so we can deliver value to the customer. Start looking at the items that give us the biggest ROI right now. What are the low-hanging fruit? So at Unicorn Co., we already had a build automation system. No one was using it. So we started just enabling that. We started adding continuous integration. Now, every time people pushed code up to Git, we started having builds. And as we saw that teams were getting excited and they were getting value out of this, we enable them to sprinkle some of the DevOps fairy dust across all their teams and enable them to also do those Agile engineering practices.
Yeah, so it's lucky that we sell fairy dust. But really what we did is we one person in the team to have a dedicated time to choose those items that would bring the biggest return on investment. So give people some time to work on those things that they feel most passionate about on making the team a better place and improving the team. So in some cases it was one person dedicated per team for an amount of time, and in other cases it was a few hours per week. So a couple people on the team for a few hours per week. The idea is don't focus on what you can't do, but focus on what you can start doing right now. So some key drivers for successful transformation. So in my experience, and in Unicorn Co, it held true too. We grew up as a company, so we started adding more teams because we wanted to be faster. But what happened? We had more and more ideas, and the market was changing, so all these ideas and projects and initiatives would come pouring in. So we actually started slowing down, and especially with the manual processes. But what we needed to do is, at the enterprise level, stop focusing on all of the projects at once and really prioritize the top few at the very top of the organization, and get people to buy in that we are not going to start new projects. We are going to finish the ones that we have in queue. So let's finish the first 3 that we have. You think about context switching and all the people it takes. Even if you haven't started an initiative, it drains their time away when they have to think about how I'm going to spin up this new project or how I'm going to get started on this. So you're taking your valuable people away from the things that they're working on and the focus that they have. So stop starting and start finishing.
And this also this goes back to aligning everyone to what the company really wants to do, or how do we help the company be successful and deliver value. So now people were not so focused on just like, hey, we need to get all the features out there. Now they're focused on getting the right features out there to help our customers.
Right. So right, we're not holding true to the value of Agile and getting feedback if we have 15 projects in process and we're not delivering to any customer on any one of them because it's taking us so long. So finish those ones, get those out to the customers and get that feedback. So we've seen also as teams grow up and we add people, we're now optimizing for keeping those people busy because we have the ops team over here, and we forget about service delivery. So that's exactly what happened. This hierarchical organization sprung out of this small company that was being very nimble and agile in its infancy, but it grew up. So now people were just being busy, and we forgot how to have a multi-team mentality of, at the end of the day, why are we here? We're trying to deliver value to our Unicorn Co customers. So optimize for service delivery, and then have a backlog of items in one list that people can pull from as they have free capacity.
Right, in some cases, those were not features. In some cases where, hey, we'd like to add this other automation thing so we can make our delivery better. So, yeah, so that helped.
Absolutely. And so I've touched on this before, but we are not being nimble as an organization if we still have those handoffs. So define a process and teams that include all skill sets to take it from something from design to deployment. So that will minimize the handoffs and stop thinking about the amount of time that the person may not be working or may not be busy. But again, it goes back to optimizing for service delivery by including all those skill sets, because you will minimize handoffs in that way. And what we've learned over the past 20 plus years doing Agile is that cross-functional teams provide a lot of value.
Yeah, and then that also allowed teams to start getting a production-first mindset. So as they're writing a line of code, it's not about, well, which feature does this align to? It's how's this line of code, how am I going to measure the impact that this line of code had? How am I going to measure whether this line of code just broke everything? How am I going to measure whether this line of code actually made it to production? So that helped a lot with that.
Yep, very good point. So that brings us to the next point, right? When your teams go to work every day, do they know what's making their company successful? So at Unicorn Co, people weren't really sure. It became sort of like a feature factory where it was just pushing out one feature after another, and they weren't really sure how that feature made Unicorn Co successful. So make sure that the teams know how their work is making the company successful and what does delivering value mean as an organization. So this is going to be different for every single company, but don't look at the story points that you're delivering. Think about how does that make your company successful.
Yeah, don't just look for some metric out there that you're going to be focusing on just because everyone else does it, right? Look at the metrics that are going to make a difference at your organization. And yeah, so as we start delivering more value to our customers, that also allowed us to get more, have those feedback loops in place to be able to learn whether we are delivering the right value to our customers and to our organization. How do I know that the thing that we just built is being used? How do we know that new widget actually removes that pain away that the customer was having? And even along the way, I just wrote some code. Did I break some other system? Well, I need to know that pretty quickly, and having those feedback loops early on to let us know whether something broke because we're running those test cases early and often are key.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the teams inside of Unicorn Code decided not to deploy anything without having a way to measure it, and that really changed the way people came to work in the morning, because all of a sudden they're excited. They had a deployment last night, and let's see how customers are using our application. So it actually increased engagement across the company as that spread across the company. So that was super exciting.
Yeah, that removed that siloed mentality where I'm just a coder, or I'm just a tester, where we are delivering this and we're together going to deliver this value to the customer. Look, I can see how they're being used. And that brings us to having the ability to measure. A lot of times we deliver something and we have that gut feel. Yeah, that feels like this is the right thing to do. Or the website seems slower this morning. Did you guys release something last night? Or yeah, it seems like that was a successful release. Well, let's take the gut feel away and let's have a way to measure what is the impact of our changes to the organization, to our customers. Hey, is someone actually clicking that new button? Or did they get to the button the way that we thought they were going to get to the button? Or, hey, the site up until yesterday was super fast, and we can see there's some slowdown started at 2 a.m. when the release happened. And without being able to measure the impact that your changes have to the organization or to our customers, it's really difficult. I mean, Unicorn Co. has over 500,000 customers, and it's impossible for me to pick up the phone and call each one of them and say, hey, how's the site working for you today? So give the customers a say into your backlog by measuring what they're doing and then making your decisions based on that.
Absolutely. So you'll no longer spend time maintaining or working on features that don't make sense because people aren't actually using them, even if they said they were going to use them.
Right. So now we're focusing on the right features.
Absolutely.
And then as we started doing this, we wanted to make sure that all 40 or 50 teams had an easy way to participate into our automation. We didn't want to make everyone an expert at our tools, at our processes. We wanted them to be aware of it. We wanted to be able to enable them to participate into this process. So we implemented a way for them to say, well, the moment I accepted a pull request, a build's running and we're deploying something out to production or to the correct environment. And it was that allowed us to get this across all the different teams.
Absolutely. So what that did is that if you have multiple teams working on one product, it will bring the teams much more closely together also and much more closely aligned.
Right, and remove silos. And sometimes we say, yeah, you can't do the builds because you wouldn't understand that. So we removed all that.
Mm-hmm. So it appears to me that Agile and DevOps might be better together.
We're getting closer, right?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So I'm a people person, and I care about happy teams. So we want to implement these new tools and processes. And I like what you're saying, but how do we make sure that we're staying true to our Agile roots when we're implementing these new processes and tools? Because I don't want to forget about the people. So the way we did it was value stream mapping. So across the organization, consider how a work request comes into your development teams, the path that it travels to get out to production, and look for those bottlenecks and queues and opportunities for improvement. Because guess what? It's usually not the developers that are taking so long to deliver things. It is those handoffs and that waiting time in between the states that causes this lack of flow in your organization.
And it's not just the one-way traffic to production. We also want to make sure that we have that feedback loop, that have a way to measure what got released, and then get that any learnings back into your backlog.
Sounds like inspecting and adapting. I like it.
Correct.
So teams should be now understanding how their work fits into the bigger picture. So I touched on it a bit, the mission and vision of the product. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen, that teams just working on their tasks every day and they forget how that work fits into the bigger picture. So from a product owner perspective, make sure that your product owner is reiterating every planning meeting that you have, how that work fits into the bigger vision and mission as an organization and as a product, and how that will make the company successful, because that's the way you keep people engaged. They really want to make a difference in the organization.
Yeah, and that's going to empower everyone in the team to ask questions. Are we building the right thing? Or if you are building the thing that you think is the right thing, how are you going to measure the impact that that had?
Absolutely. So we want to align people with delivering value end-to-end using feature teams and have a unified backlog. So in the beginning, before Esteban came on board, I was trying to get this push-button environments initiative, and I was calling it push-button environments, and everyone's like, sounds great, but yeah, I mean, the product owner told me I am never going to ever prioritize something that's technical. The team should be doing this on their own. What happened? The teams were so pressured to get new features and products out the door that they didn't prioritize that at all. So again, align people delivering value end to end. Bring those ops people or whatever skill sets you need to get inside the team to deliver value for the organization.
Yeah, and then this allowed us to move away from these silos where ops had one backlog and the development team had a different backlog. Those backlogs were not aligned. One team wanted to innovate, the other team just wanted to keep the lights on. Well, that's not what Unicorn Code was about. So by bringing in a single backlog, and that aligned everyone together to understand what we're trying to do as a company.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. What I wanted to say, so in the beginning at Unicorn Co., we had a team that was just focused on new product development and another team that was just focused on technical debt and solving customer problems. And so I said, it's not up to one team to burn the toast and another team to scrape off the burn and hand it to the customer. Let's work together, and everybody should be in a cohesive fashion. So let's get dev and ops together.
Yeah.
And the last thing, as I was coming into Unicorn Co. and I sat with one of the teams in their retrospective, and they didn't come up with lots of items for improvement, and I was kind of curious, and they said, no, we're fine. We're just finishing our second sprint. And I said, well, if I had a magic wand, what would you ask for? And the guy, just without even thinking, said, if I had a preview environment, I could be twice as fast. And so all of a sudden, you realize the pain that they were experiencing, but they took it for granted. So ask those questions to your team, and they are often so familiar with the challenges, but yet just try to facilitate the question in such a way that they come up with their own solutions on their own.
Yeah, and then when Heidi came to me and said, hey, this is what the team is looking for, thankfully by then we had already been working on some of the automation and the tools to be able to enable this. So within a week, that team had those environments that we're looking for.
Absolutely. And what organization doesn't want their Scrum team to deliver twice as fast?
Hey.
So, yeah, that was I talked about the magic wand. Wow, we missed that great picture.
We did.
Yeah, it's still a great picture. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so from the DevOps perspective, as we're starting to implement this automation and these tools, how do we make sure we do this without ignoring the people aspect? So we started asking, okay, so what is going to be the thing that's going to help the teams deliver faster and just be more effective? So we started by creating a continuous integration across the board. We had the tools, we had the know-how, just had to turn it on. So now every time someone checks code in or pushes code up to Git, they get continuous integration for free. And we made sure that that was in place before any one line of code was written. And not only that, but we had a way to deploy those changes to the different environments.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're spinning up new teams, they should already have this idea in mind of how will I deliver my code before they start coding. So spend a little time planning about ahead of time, and you'll achieve greater success and speed.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we did is we tried to make sure that we were always shippable. So what does that mean? We started thinking about, okay, if I'm building something, how is this going to get deployed, rather than thinking later on. Right? I was like, yeah, I'm just going to build a feature and it's going to be potentially shippable, and at some point someone's going to want to ship it. So we said, no, think about if someone were to come to you today, how do you ship it? You can't ship your laptop. So move away from thinking of, hey, it works on my machine, move away from how is this going to run in production.
Yeah, actually that brought people together across the organization, because before the Scrum teams were not owning any of that delivery to production, but all of a sudden now we're coming together as an organization, and it's all about the customer. It's not about blame between the process or the lack of environments or whatever it is. We're coming together to deliver value to customer.
Yeah, one of the teams I was working with, as I mentioned earlier, they had been delivering or writing software or writing products or features for over 15 months. And then when it was time to release, when they were like, okay, now we're done. We really are done this time. And they didn't know how to ship. They had no clue how to ship their code because they've never done it for 15 months. So now they had to go back and say, well, remember that thing that we built 15 months ago? How do we configure that? So now they all had to stop, and now they had to figure out how to do that. And it took 50 people for 2 months to get to the point that they were now shippable. And as we grew, so I mentioned that we went from 5-people team to 40 teams with 7, 8, 9 people. What happened is that many of those teams started coming up with their own ways to measure what's going on in production. They implemented their own instrumentation framework. Some of them bought some off-the-shelf products. Some of them built their own. Some of them got some open source stuff. the problem was that now we had no one way to measure the impact that our features were having on our customers. And the people that were watching, the operations team, they had to pull up all these different dashboards just to get their answer to the question, what's happening with production? So what we did is we got everyone together and we came up with a single instrumentation strategy that was able to apply it across all the teams. Some people had to settle on some things, some others, but what we ended up with is a much more powerful way to measure what is the impact that our new features are having on our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And by doing that, we eliminated some tools. We actually saved some money and also a lot of time at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you're going to get some pushback. Hey, this sounds difficult. It sounds like it's going to take a long time. So look for the things that bring the biggest ROI to your team, right? Not everyone's going to benefit from CI. Not everyone's going to benefit from TDDs. Not everyone's going to benefit by having a release pipeline. At some point they will, but that might not be the biggest pain at that moment. So figure out what is the most painful thing that your team is having. What is the thing that's preventing them from deliver value quickly to the customer, and implement that. And you're going to gain some traction. You're going to get some people, some excitement around the organization, and they're going to be willing to keep doing more.
Yeah, so we started, like we said, with just one person in one team with a time dedicated to that, or a few hours in a few teams. But it was that momentum around seeing what could be achieved with just a few hours that gave us the encouragement to keep going, and also gave buy-in from the rest of the organization to spend more time doing the things that were very, very valuable for the organization.
And what I tell some of my teams, sometimes some people might push back and say, yeah, we don't have time for that. We still have all these features. We needed to keep up with our velocity, right? There's we can't compromise on that. So we said, well, I'm pretty sure that no one's going to fire you from doing the right thing. So go and figure out what is the thing that's going to help you. So write that one test case. Or, hey, implement that continuous integration build for one of your microservices. Figure out how to create that infrastructure as code that's going to allow you to deploy a little bit faster. Don't ask for permission to do the right thing. Just go and implement those things that are going to improve the quality and your ability to deliver value.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened in some of the teams is that they were so mired in technical debt that even a 2-point story would take the whole entire sprint because the code was just so yucky that they had to handle. So don't get stuck in the mud like this truck, but focus on keeping the organization going at a sustainable pace. So in Agile, we talk about sustainable pace and unit testing and TDD and some good practices. People don't realize if you start off fast, it's always easy to start fast, but if you don't work at a sustainable pace and do the right thing, you're actually going to get stuck in the mud.
Yeah, and one of the things that happened with those teams that I told you that hadn't released in 15 months, at the end they had to stop, and 50 people had to test manually for 2 months. And imagine how much that time and money.
Yes. Manual QA is cruel and unusual punishment. I think it should be almost not abolished completely, but whatever can be automated should be automated.
No, it's true. And after that project, a lot of people from those teams just left because doing manual testing for 2 months, it's tough. Yeah. And then, if you're still getting some pushback on, well, we're not really ready for all this automation stuff, make the impact, make sure that everyone understands how much is this costing your organization, whether it's money or time or whatever you're looking at, but make it very visible.
Yeah, so actually this is a real chart, and it's only across 3 of the teams. But I would hear this pain across the teams. I was listening in on the stand-ups and retrospectives, and so I had people report to me from those teams the hours, the amount of time that they spent blocked on manual process, either waiting for a deployment, the environment wasn't working, or some other reason that they were blocked from doing something that they could do because of our manual processes. So once we made the impact, and we said it's almost 200 hours in a month, and that's only across 3 teams. So once that information came to light, the conversation changed now because people were hearing it sprinkled across the organization, but no one really knew the impact of all the wasted time that we were having. So really, that actually got a lot of buy-in at that point.
Right. Eventually, all those 200 hours were replaced by now we're spending that time into automating things and to bringing more value.
Mm-hmm. So I actually think that in the signing of the Agile Manifesto, have you guys heard of the Agile Manifesto? So the Agile Manifesto has 12 principles behind it. And I think that when they wrote these 12 principles, they had the DevOps mindset in mind. We're talking about satisfying the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software.
Yeah, so as your software, your products get bigger and bigger, it's really, really difficult to get that software into the hands of the customer without putting in some DevOps practices, without bringing in those tools to be able to aid the teams to deliver.
Yeah, it's talking about working software frequently.
Right, and if we move away from thinking about, hey, we do releases every 6 months or every 3 months or every month, but we start thinking about how many releases have we done today, how many releases have we done this week, that allows you to do that.
Absolutely. So the principles talk about agile processes promoting sustainable development.
Right, and so as your, we all know that as projects get bigger, your code base is going to get bigger. You might have other microservices, other databases, other infrastructure in place, and it's going to be impossible for you to be able to deliver at the same pace throughout the whole project if you don't have some tools and processes that allow you to automate some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 2001, when they wrote this, software was much different than it is today. We didn't have SaaS software. We couldn't just push a button to deploy. So we believe that this was their intention all along, was the Agile and DevOps really belong together.
Yeah. So,
yeah, what are our takeaways anyways?
So our takeaways is that Agile and DevOps do belong together. We don't believe that you're going to be able to be a successful Agile organization if you don't have those Agile software development or software engineering practices in place, if you don't implement automation, if you don't bring tools in to aid the teams to deliver. And from the DevOps perspective, you're not going to have a successful DevOps transformation if you're not working with the teams to collaborate together, bring Dev and Ops together, bring everyone using the same backlog and have the same direction that fit with the company.
Absolutely.
So
awesome.
This was the story about Unicorn Co., a company that had a lot of challenges, and now we have 40 Agile teams working cohesively on the most important things. We no longer care about delivering the most features, but we care about releasing the correct features. We have continuous delivery and feedback from our customers because we're able to measure what we release, and we're able to release quickly, and we're able to release often. Everything's automated, everything's instrumented, and all the teams are using this very similar instrumentation frameworks and very similar patterns that allow everyone to be able to be on the same page with that. And the moment someone says, hey, I need a new environment, that's just a push of a button. And now we have a new environment to support a new branch, a new environment, a new team.
Great.
So thank you very much. Here's our contact information, and we're here for some questions. And there's about 5 more minutes. If you have any questions, please come up to the mic.